I am Abby Palko. I am the director, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this evening. And you can't exactly tell because our offices are obviously very different, but Jaronda, Leanne, and I are all coming to you from the Women's Center. So I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We're here in the Women's Center at UVA. So if you could please join me in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we are on today. And so for those of us coming from the Women's Center, it's the Monacan Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. In addition to being able to hear the chapel bells from where I'm sitting, I can also, once the leaves fall, see the memorial to enslaved laborers from the seat I'm in. So I'd like to acknowledge the enslaved laborers who built the university, as well as thinking of those who have been harmed by racism and racialized violence, particularly as right now, the trials are underway for both the organizers of the Unite the Right rally here in Charlottesville and for Gregory McMichael, his son Travis, and their neighbor William Bryan for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. So to pause and remember those who have been harmed by that violence, as well as to remember those who have been impacted by, including those who have died from COVID. So we did one of these talks last August, other than our graduation reception in June in the height of lockdown. This was our first public COVID event, and it was really heartening for me actually to sit and reflect on everything that's happened since the last time we did one of these. Some of you all were on that call as well. Some things like so much smoother doing Zoom. I'm not sure that's a skill set I ever aspired to have, but it's funny to think of like how much more streamlined doing presentations like this are now. So obviously there are those kinds of updates to provide, but the very first one that I want to share with you all is an announcement that I was able to share with the rest of the staff just last Monday. Jaronda Miller-Bryant, who has been with the Women's Center for almost 7 years, very excitedly and graciously agreed to take on a new portfolio of responsibilities here at the Women's Center. And so tonight I am thrilled to publicly introduce her to you as the Assistant Director for Engaged Scholarship. In this new role with these new responsibilities, Jaronda and I are going to be working really closely together to continue to develop and build up the Engaged Scholarship program, including the internship program, which she has been running since she arrived here, and she'll be taking on responsibility for building more community connections and doing more work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion areas. And so with that, I want to actually turn it over to Jaronda to give her a couple minutes just to share an update or two on the internship front, a thought or two about the new role, and for you all to have a chance to see her excitement for this role that she's taking on here at the Women's Center. So Jaronda, I'm going to mute and turn it over to you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for the chat. Y'all are very sweet for the messages. It's so good to see so many of my old students in here and colleagues. And I just want to say thank you. I am very excited about this new role. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to continue at the Women's Center in this capacity. So there's a lot of things that I'm just really grateful for and really excited about. I just want to take a minute to say thank you to Abby for her vision and for her support of this particular type of work at the Women's Center, and also Anda Webb and Lynn Stewart, who I know were behind the scenes as well, kind of making this all happen. So I want to say thank you for that. But in terms of the role, I have a lot of ideas that I'm anxious to to really roll out. And some of the things that I'm going to be focusing on, as Abby mentioned, is our presence in DEI work. I think the Women's Center has done a lot of really good work. People are on board and pushing forward with becoming an anti-racist organization within the Women's University of Virginia, and we're going to continue to do that. And I think this role will really help facilitate some of that as well. Again, a lot of my work will still remain with the internship program, which is my pride and joy, because I get to meet so many students and really work with the recruitment and the retention and the application process. And I'm really excited about being able to really continue that work. And little shameless plug, last year, in the middle of a pandemic, were able to double our application pool. And that application pool was probably one of the most diverse we've seen in many, many years here at the Women's Center. So very proud about that work and want to continue doing that. And let me just give a shout out to Karishma, who's on the call, who was my grad student last year, who really stood by me and the team to kind of make that happen. I never take full credit for anything because I have wonderful people who I work with. And I'm very excited to continue to work with them in this capacity and the expanded role of Assistant Director for Engaged Scholarship. So that's where we're going and that's where we're headed, and I'm very excited about it.
Thanks, Jaronda. I'm going to, Leanne, you might have to change the pin. I can't seem to do that. So some of the path forward as we figure out what the new role looks like, Jaronda and I are figuring that out as we go, but that for us, or I'll just speak for me and say that's one of the most exciting parts, is that she and I, in this process, we've come together multiple times for a conversation, and one has said, hey, I had this thought, and the other one's like, wait, I had that thought too. So we're really, really excited to see how this will position the Women's Center to grow and contribute to the work, both here in the center and across grounds. I want to real quickly, I'm going to share my screen and show you two other new staff members who joined us just at the end of August, like August 30th. And then we'll pause and have a chance for y'all to ask any questions on the Engaged Scholarship front that you might like to ask. So the two young women that I have spotlighted here, Taylor Nichols has joined us coming from Towson University, and she is taking on the work of leading the Gender Violence and Social Change team. So that is a piece of the work that Claire Kaplan did for such a long time for us here at the Women's Center. Last year, Latoria White had worked on that, and very sadly, Latoria decided to move away from the university last June, or in June. So we had to find a successor, and that is Taylor. So the GVSC work that she'll be doing, or already is doing, this is one of the longest standing programs here at the Women's Center. With the staffing changes, I took the opportunity to do a little tweaking to the roles. So the other half of her time will be spent doing work on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as well. And a sort of informal breakdown in our minds among myself, Jaronda, and Taylor is that Taylor's focusing on that work at the intern/student level. Jaronda's focusing on it at the next level, particularly for the Women's Center and professional development, starting to move out into the university. And then I'm taking the sort of, if you think about the front doors as a dotted dividing line, I'm doing the Pan University big events. And it's a rough informal division amongst the three of us, but really we're just crossing back and forth with ideas, and you'll hear some more of them later on in the call as well. So Taylor is brand new in that role. And then also starting on August 30th, Deirdre Bendixton, who is our new receptionist up front. And so if you are here in town and able to come over to the center during the day, please come on in and say hello to her. It makes her day when she gets to welcome people to the center. And so we are thrilled to have her here as well. Those of you who are students on the call, watch for events coming up. She started to plan a little gathering for students sometime in the next couple of weeks, just a little like come in, have some stress relief, do something that's completely fun and just for you. The next area that I wanted to focus on is to provide some updates on our outreach efforts, particularly our counseling services. So I have some stats that I'm pulling up and getting into the right spot to show you. Okay, I'm going to again share my screen. This is a Word document on my laptop. I think it's the easiest way to show you a bunch of numbers. So this is going to give you a sense of what the demand for counseling has been here over the past year. So the numbers I'm showing run from July 1 of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. And then I'll give you a quick update on the first few months of this year. So you can see a little bit bigger. So you can see that there over last year was a pretty decent increase in number of clients who we were able to serve. Some of that was the reality or the logistical reality of providing mental health services remotely during the pandemic. So we have seen that with the option for telehealth services, some students who, or some clients who weren't always able to make it over to the center for their services, were able to be able to arrive a little more consistently through telehealth. There also was a moment in the 2020-2021 year where we had some extra counseling hours available as we were doing some of the shifting around with staff. There was a moment where we had about 6.5 counselors available rather than the 6 that we are funded to have. So you can see most of our clients are students. We do see some community members and alumni and a few employees. The majority identify as women, but not all of them. And you see a steady increase, both of those who identify as men and those who identify within the LGBTQ community and or as non-binary, that is increasing as well. We've long been known for providing trauma-informed long-term care for those who have suffered personal or interpersonal trauma. Another thing that we are developing, or I don't know if I want to say developing expertise in, but another thing we are starting to specialize more in is providing therapy for those clients, particularly students who face barriers to making use of community-based services, either financial barriers or logistical barriers that preclude them from physically getting from grounds or wherever they're living to the community provider. So the vast majority of our clients are those who cannot afford other mental health options. The co-pays, even with the student insurance, are very high. Spaces open in the community are limited. So this is a service and an offering for the students here that is really, really important. You'll also see that a number of our clients, roughly 25% of them, are first-generation Americans, and they are coming from a wide number of different countries. So some of the increase, with the ease provided by telehealth, you see in this increase in numbers. The middle column was the 2019-2020 year, and then this left-hand column where my mouse is hovering is last year. So you see that increase there. With students being away from grounds last year and streamlining some of our services, that's where you see the drop in case management services provided. And then this is a snapshot of some of the issues, the most common issues that bring clients to us for counseling services. And the numbers will add up to more than our total number of clients because many clients are selecting more than one issue. Last year was the first year we started tracking racial trauma, which is why there's only numbers there for last year. And then here's the demographic breakdown of the clients that we are seeing. And then the numbers for the last few months are holding pretty steady. This is a screenshot, so it's much smaller, I'm sorry. But July through the end of last week to date, there have been 921 counseling sessions with 143 case management inquiries. And 14 people have reached out for confidential consultations for Title IX and sexual misconduct. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And there have been a few outreach talks and some scheduled sessions with Poe, the therapy dog. So I'm going to show that for a second. So you can see that a lot of the requests for counseling are holding steady, if not increasing. The last few months in particular, we've seen an increased requests for services. CAPS has seen increased requests for services. The community providers have seen that as well. So there is a new mental health app that Student Health rolled out just a week or two ago that is available to all students who are currently enrolled. It's called the Timely Care app. And this provides online telehealth therapy for students with their student fees. They get 12 sessions a year through this telehealth delivery model. And the latest update we have from CAPS is that since the rollout, I believe it was, there've been a good number. I'm trying to pull the numbers out of my head. I'm sorry. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, there's been about 5,000 students sign up for it. And about 50 students have already scheduled and started having appointments through it. There is also a rapid response component to it. So if you need immediate help, you can call that immediate number. And that has a really fast response time as well. So the feedback so far is that this is a helpful service that students are finding their way to and taking advantage of. And so we are really pleased to see this as an additional offering here at the university. On a related front, those of you who follow changes to Title IX and the way it gets applied at universities know that the Title IX regulations changed a little over a year ago, just after the pandemic started. And so UVA adjusted its policies where it needed to in response to that. It's left us with a little bit of a question on how we handle confidential advocacy here at the center. Although I've just in the last couple of weeks had a couple of conversations with Emily Springston about that. I'm going to pause myself there and just give you the names of two new people in the Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights Office and on the Title IX staff. So Emily Springston is the Associate Vice President for EOCR. She started sometime in the spring. And then Meredith Smith is the incoming new Title IX coordinator. Meredith's first day is next Monday. No one's counting down. They come to us from other institutions where they each had really great experience. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to serve on the search committee for both of them. And so I was thrilled to get to know them throughout that process and really excited when UVA extended the offers to them and they accepted. So I've been in conversations with Emily about how we handle this. And with Meredith coming in, there'll be some more conversation about the ways that we, and the we being UVA, more broadly speaking, provide support for students who are going through the Title IX process. For the last year or so, Margaret Edwards, our program director of counseling and wellness services, had been handling those calls for us. And that was totally manageable during the pandemic while we were remote. But now that we are back in person, that really needs to be divided away from the counseling team. So we have a community member who has agreed to come on a part-time basis for the rest of this academic year to serve as our confidential advocate. They'll be working with me in that role. We still have to sign the papers, so I can't say their name yet, but I am excited to have them coming on as well to provide that service and help for students who are looking for that support as they contemplate whether or not they will make a report. And more importantly, they think about what connections to resources they need across the university. So I'm going to pause there for a second to see if there are questions on the counseling or the confidential advocacy front. So Gabby, go ahead. You're welcome to unmute yourself. And Sydney, I see your question. I'm going to get to you next.
Hi. So I'm really excited to hear that UVA is getting more options for counseling for students. I kind of have two questions, and you might not be able to answer the first one. Is there any plan in place to devise, I guess, financial support for students who might need more than the 12 sessions and aren't able to afford it? Or is it something that's already available on a sliding scale to students after the 12 sessions? And then how many counselors are at Bowen Center right now? And if it's below the 6, are there plans to hire a new one?
No, Gabby, I'm going to go backwards. So there are 6 counselors at the Women's Center. It is Margaret, Kathy, Jamie, Aisha, Uriel, and Amelia. So they are all here. And with the Timely Care app, there are some talks about, so let me start that sentence again. In terms of financial access and student need for financial access or assistance to access mental health services, Leanne and Margaret and I are in the middle of a series of conversations with a man named Eugene Anderson. He is new here as well. He started May or June, I believe, in University Advancement, and he does fundraising for diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And so we are providing him with as much data as he wants about the needs that we see for students and the ways that we see a broad range of access to mental health support as an equity issue. One of the things that the time with the app can be spent on is some students just need help figuring out how to use their insurance and how to access it and all of that. Because as anyone on the call who's ever attempted to use their insurance and had to go through pre-authorizations and prior approvals and all of that knows, it can be really hard. And so some of those early sessions can be used on help with that as well. And CAPS has put out some training videos for anyone who wants to get the information that way. to learn about it. So looking at it from multiple angles. And side note, Gabby, thanks for hopping on. And it's like, I needed a moment there to remember you're not just in your apartment down the street from me. So to see you. And then I think that, Sydney, I saw your question. And so I don't know. So I'm reading your question. How did students find out about it? I know that there was a story about it in UVA today. I don't know where else it's been publicized. It is on the CAPS website, and I'm putting that in the chat now. So the link I put there takes you to the page on CAPS's website where you can find it. You also, and this takes another step, but you can also find it on our website under the counseling stuff. So I'll put that link in there as well, where if you go to our website, right, you'll see right here for UVA students, there's CAPS and then there's timely care. And then if you click that, it takes you over here. And so this has the how you get started. Yeah. So yeah, we're really happy to have the chance to share that information with you all. Anna, I see your question. We're at capacity. So Anna's question is there plans to expand our counseling services here? And honestly, there isn't, which is probably the hardest thing I have to say on this call tonight, because I know how great the demand is. But in terms of capacity to manage it, like, we can't just add one more person and keep scaling up. We'd have to add another supervisor. We'd have to repurpose space. And honestly, this is the really hardest thing. We, the Women's Center, cannot solve this issue on our own. The need for greater access and better access to mental health services is not just a Women's Center issue. It's not just a CAPS issue. It's not just a UVA issue. It is a national issue, and we all have to work together on that front. You know, we need more smart, empathetic people going into the counseling field. We need better insurance and better access for folks who are looking for services. We need health dispelling stigma against seeking out mental health support in some communities. It's a multifaceted issue. And the piece of our counseling that so many people love so much is in part that that vibe is there because it's a small center. If we went larger, we would lose that piece of it. Yeah, Anna, does that answer your question? And I can't actually.
It does, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Awesome. So Fiona, I see your question and this is fabulous. I'm trying to read it all and like not let my mouse move. So discussing creating their own women's center at the University of Delaware, how to make it more inclusive and ensure we remain intersectional and not just supporting women. Also, what other services, what is the center used for outside of counseling? Okay, so very first thing I'm gonna say, Fiona, is I am more than happy to also do an offline call with you at any point. I'm putting my email in the chat. Happy to do a call one-on-one with anyone. I'm going to actually segue us into the third section, Fiona, because I think that's going to start to answer some of your questions. And then I'll come back to it at the end if I haven't completely. So on the third of the three segments that we wanted to give an update on is sort of related to the DEI front. It's looking forward some of the programming we have lined up for this year. So the very first thing that I want to say is to again reiterate my thanks, but also on behalf of the entire staff's thanks, on behalf of the entire staff, their thanks for the support that all of you on the call have shown us through the years. Some of you are current students involved with our work. We're thrilled you're here. Some of you are really recent alums. We're thrilled you're here. Some of you have been friends and supporters of the Women's Center for years and decades, and we're thrilled you're here, and we really appreciate it. And it's all of those kinds of support, your time, your talent, your treasure, that have really helped us to grow and flourish and provide resources and support for students across grounds and the entire university community. So thank you on that front. I was up in DC a couple of weeks ago for a dinner for my undergraduate institution. So I was where you all are sitting now. And a couple of people asked me what the Women's Center does. And so I started with the, fairly standard, well-developed. We are an academic support unit, so we provide a variety of services to support students so that they can make the most of their time here. I said on campus because I was not in the UVA world and I didn't want to sidetrack the conversation with grounds, but you all understand when I say grounds. Centerpiece of Engaged Scholarship is the year-long internship. I explained that. I explained the support services. The centerpiece of those are counseling. And then I said a bit of what I'll talk about next. I said, in some ways, it really feels to me like we have become the sort of unofficial historians of women on grounds and the experiences that women have had. And so with that, the last 2 years, we did a lot of work preparing for celebrations of last year's anniversary milestones in the move towards full coeducation here at UVA. COVID impacted some of them, but not all of them. And so one of the things, if you have not seen it yet, that I would like to share with you is the work that we did, led by Leanne, who's on the call, and Mary Esselman, who is the editor of the Iris magazine, to sponsor a juried art competition last spring, open to students, faculty, staff, and community members, looking for newer, more expansive, more inclusive visions of who the UVA student is. Right, so we had an alumna, the Alumni Association brought to us an alumna who had contacted them about this old mid-19th century sketch of the student. And, if you look carefully, you can see range behind him. And so we issued this request for new representations of the UVA student called Represent. And for a long time, we had them hanging in the windows here at the Women's Center. A selection of them are actually up now in Clemens Library. So if you are here in Charlottesville or on grounds, we invite you to go over and see them there. Watch for an announcement on our website with an event for Friday, November 12th, early afternoon. We'll be tabling outside of Clemens with some hot drinks, assuming it'll be November. So assuming that coffee and hot chocolate will be welcome then, some hot drinks and cookies, and encouraging people to go in and see the exhibit there. also with information about how to connect to an app to use for a walking tour of grounds that looks at women's education here and women's experience on grounds that my students helped me research and write last fall. If you are not here in Charlottesville and want to see it, our colleagues up in UVA Arts also created an online virtual gallery for us with the Students' Choice Awards first, and then the winners in each of the 4 categories, and then all of the rest of the participants as well. These are incredibly powerful. And for me, last March and April and May, the chance to sit with them, as we contemplated an entire year done in that weird way, just meant so much. And so I'm thrilled that we can share them with everyone this way. So you can see there's a wide variety. It's hard to say I have a favorite, but I will point out one that always really speaks to me, in part because of the artist's explanation of it. So up here, this one by Caitlin. She took a selfie near the beginning of lockdown and then used strands of her hair to embroider it. And that's the front of it. But this, you'll notice, you can't see it here, but this is in the 3D category because it's not just this picture. It's also the back where you can see, and in her artist statement, she talked about how the front looks so perfect and put together and neat. And she's very proud of it. And the back is a little messy. The front hides the messiness. And for me, this speaks so poignantly to the experiences that we have students coming to us to grapple with in so many different ways throughout their years here at UVA, right? How do they make sense of the messiness? How do they hide it? How do they own it? How do they feel like they don't need to hide it? That image between what they're expected to project versus what they're really experiencing. Every year, all of us on staff have at least one student, if not more, come to us and say, I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if I'm the UVA student because I don't fit this stereotype. And then they list it and we're like, you are not the first person to say this to us. You are not the second person. You're not the 12th person. You're not the 40th person. So I'm kind of guessing, this is how I then add it, like, you belong here, because we hear this often. And so this piece really speaks to that for me. And go back here. That's got a link here. This link takes you to, that is not the page I thought it was going to. Just check that later. Oh, because that's a different link. Sorry, that's for resources. So we have this exhibit available. We'll have an event celebrating it November 12th. We have the walking tour app, which is available. And we just announced earlier this week plans for us here at the Women's Center. And this is going to be a scaffolded effort. My interns and I are taking the lead on it. At some point, Jaronda may be contributing to it. Taylor may be contributing to it. We are building that ship as we move along the lake. We've put out a call for partners across grounds to help us celebrate Women's History Month this upcoming March. And so there's 2 components to that. We'll be offering some co-sponsorships for partners in other departments, units, schools, student organizations to request financial co-sponsorship with us. We have money set aside for 3 events to help other units put on events And then the second piece of it is we'll be collating all of the events for Women's History Month that anyone wants to submit to us into a single calendar / flyer to help advertise that. So looking to spotlight and honor the incredible work being done across grounds, but not just limited to that. Oh, awesome. I think Leanne got the link for us. Thank you. So we have those events coming up. I'm thinking back to Fiona's question, you know, some of the question, how do we make sure we're open and inclusive to all? We talk about that a lot. You know, whenever I have the chance to talk to students, I remind them that we are here to support your journey at UVA. So any thoughts you have, please come to me or to anyone else on staff. We welcome them. One of the issues, and colleagues across the country grapple with this as well, is the question of the name. And that is a bit of a philosophical question. And I'm fully aware as I say that even as it's philosophical, that it's also people's real lives that are involved. We are having conversations about, is the name inclusive enough? If we were to propose a different name, what would it be? And how do we come up with the words that make it clear that we are here for everyone who wants to engage with us, without turning a name into a sentence? But then the other piece of it is some centers have dropped the word women's, and yet that seems to imply that all of the issues that folks face as women have been solved, and they haven't. The fact that this, I've pretty much just said to you a run-on sentence for 2 minutes long, gives you a sense of like how we are grappling with multiple things here. And so yes, and instead of women's center. So some other colleges and universities have gender equity centers. Some have women's and gender equity centers. We have Max's name on our building, and she is both a phenomenal role model for all of us who do this work and also a generous supporter. So her name is not going anywhere. So when I start to think about saying the Maxine Platzerlin Women's and Gender Equity Center, that's what I meant when I said turning a name into a sentence. It's an issue that we're talking about here and that colleagues and folks are talking about across the country. And I think reflective of, honestly, it feels to me reflective of the gender socialization and gender roles and gender identity issues that folks in general, but more specifically our students are grappling with. So thinking about how we do that. You know, we have done our best in this space to make it bright and open and welcoming, and to have visual cues that it is open and welcoming to all. I'm going to put a period there and say, if you have thoughts or questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm looking at the time. We've got just about 10 minutes left. So I'm happy to take a question on anything. I may or may not be able to answer it, but always happy to take it. And if I can't answer it right away, I can find out an answer for you. Or is there any information that I did not include in those 3 highlights that you were hoping to hear about? So I realized recently I've gotten to this funny stage in my career where I spent so long at the beginning teaching, where I'm like, I can sit in silence forever until a student jumps in. And then I'm like, but there are moments where actually that's not what I should be doing. So I will keep talking, but if you have questions, either unmute, raise your hand or throw them in the chat. I will say, since we welcomed back the interns the end of August, I cannot tell you how many times I've walked in this building and felt tears well up in my eyes because there are students back here again after 17 months. I had this morning, a colleague brought his COLA class over for their Women's Center tour and orientation. And it was the first time we'd had a class visit the building since probably November of 2019, because the COLAs are in the fall. And it made me remember when Liz and her friends were filming Liz's senior thesis in the lower level the last week in February, first week in March before spring break of 2020. And, you know, with Jaronda's transition, we were talking about the Black Womanhood in College workshop that she and her team have put on. I see Ellen's on the call. Ellen, I think you helped on the first year with that. And just remembering that that happened February 29th of 2020, and that was the last in-person event we had done. Just like having those emotions and adjusting to having people back here has been absolutely wonderful, because, you know, the rest of the Women's Center staff were phenomenal throughout the working remote piece. And, you know, I'm almost done the annual report. I got sidetracked because Wynn asked me to do something else for her. And I told her I could do that something else, but it meant I had to pause the annual report. And she said yes. But as I'm finishing that up this week and I'm looking at what these reminders of what the rest of the team accomplished over that year, I'm just blown away again. And so grateful for the dedication that they've all shown to our work and our mission throughout a hard year plus. We are very grateful for the enduring support you all and the rest of our supporters and friends have shown us. And honestly, for me, at least, thrilled that every morning I get to wake up and come to work and make a contribution to something that will, as I tell the interns every year at orientation, I'm like, so I've got X number of years to go to retirement, closing in on 20 years to go. But if you all want to make my job obsolete because you have solved the problems this year, I am happy to figure out early retirement or do a mid-career change. So it is, it's been, last year was challenging, but there's a lot of hope in there too. So what I'll wrap up with is just to say, so we are back working in person, in case that wasn't obvious. And in case you couldn't hear the cars honking on the corner as they passed me. More trains than ever go by. Somehow trucks have stopped. I'm knocking on wood, hitting the bridge. I don't know how. They've lit the sign up, maybe that helps. But so we are back here in person. So we're open Monday through Wednesday, 9 to 8, with extended hours from 5 to 8. We have a couple of staff members in here so that students can use it as a drop-in space then. And Thursday and Friday from 9 to 5. We have come back with some flex scheduling. So if you're interested in meeting with someone in particular, please check in with them in advance to make sure it's a moment when they're working here in the building and not working remotely. And I am happy to jump on a call or welcome any of you here if you want to see the space, if you haven't seen it lately, or ask more detailed checkup questions. Otherwise, I'm going to pause because one of the things that I have learned to do over the last year is to, if a meeting is scheduled beginning of the hour to the end of the hour, to actually try and stop just a couple minutes early, because sometimes folks get booked back to back to back to back to back. So if you need to hop off, it's been lovely having you here. Thank you for coming. But I'll also stay on in case anyone has individual thoughts or questions.